Hello and welcome. You're watching To The Point. Should politicians retire at 65 or 70, as Congress General Secretary Janardhan Dwivedi has suggested, or should they continue like Ronald Reagan past 75 as long as they are productive and popular? And can a country like India lay down a retirement age when it clearly venerates age over youth? That's the discussion in part 2. But first, the Prime Minister's Dhan Yojana, which was launched with great aplomb and excitement yesterday evening. Is it proof of the new government's dynamism? Is this the answer to eliminating poverty, as Mr. Modi claims? And at the very least, will it change the lives of hundreds of millions of Indian people? That's our first discussion tonight. And now joining me to discuss the Prime Minister's Dhan Yojana and the impact it could have on the lives of the 40% who have never had a is former Chief Economic Advisor Arvind Virmani, former Finance Secretary Ashok Jha, the editor of Mail Today Sandeep Bamzai, and the well-known author and columnist Gurcharan Das. Mr. Virmani, yesterday the Prime Minister launched the Dhan Yojana, which aims to give some 75 million households banking facilities by the 26th of January 2015. Each customer will get a debit card, accident insurance of 1 lakh, life insurance of 30,000, and then after a gap of 6 months, very probably a overdraft facility of 5,000. If it is all completely and successfully put in place, what impact will this have on the lives of the people affected and therefore on the economy?
So, there's a whole range of complementary things which are needed to affect, and this is one of them. So there will not be an immediate effect. The effects come later. For example, if the government starts paying benefits directly into the accounts, you can have if, for example, the skill mission is successful and people are able to get jobs, then it will have an effect. So these things are complementary. You don't live in isolation, but this is part of the market economy. For the poor people, especially in the remote areas, to be a part of the market economy, they have to have some bank account or some financial instrument, and they have to have jobs, and they have to be able to access the market connectivity.
If I understand you correctly, what you're saying is this is a facilitation mechanism. A lot of other things have to happen hereafter for the impact on people's lives and then the economy to actually happen. But this is an essential first step.
Absolutely. Well, it's a step, in my 20 years in government, I have learned that you don't make a rigid, first this, second this. You do whatever you can do. For example, nationalization occurred in 1969. Till 45 years later,
just a moment.
We've only covered 40%. We haven't covered 40%.
And Mr. Modi made that point yesterday. But are you saying this is not even an essential first step?
No, it is one of the steps which is essential. Yes,
one of the steps that is essential.
Yeah.
So in other words, you don't give it the.
It doesn't have to be first or second. It's complementary, right? So if you need 3 things, it doesn't matter which you do first.
All the others have to happen as well,
yes,
and quickly. Let me put it like this, Mr. Jha. It looks, as you read about this, as if it's a monumental task and challenge, particularly for the banks. Today's Business Standard says that they have to open some 7,000 new branches, 20,000 new ATM machines, and recruit 50,000 business correspondents. Is that an incredibly daunting task, or is it just the figures that make it seem awesome?
No, it's possible to do so, but as Arvind was just mentioning, see, this is a very important first step. But financial inclusion basically has 2 parameters. Number one is that you include people who have been excluded from the payment system. That this particular measure is going to do. The second important step is that you must include people who have been excluded from the credit markets. See, today in India, even though 60% of the people, at least on paper, have bank accounts,
majority are dormant.
Yeah, majority are dormant, and the important thing is that only 10% people have credit.
That inclusion in the credit market will happen to a small extent when these people, after 6 months, assuming they've operated their bank accounts satisfactorily, start accessing overdrafts of 5,000.
Now, but you see, this didn't happen when the RBI went in for this kind of measure earlier.
Can I ask you something? Why are you doubting it won't happen again?
Well, I have to go by past record, and the past record is that when no-frills accounts, 103 million no-frills accounts were opened up to 2012 March. only 1.5 million of those accounts had overdraft facility.
So you're saying actually, although an overdraft facility has been guaranteed in theory, provided the account is operated satisfactorily for 6 months, there's a big question mark whether it will actually happen in practice.
Yes.
And the track record of the 103 million accounts that you're citing is one reason you're doubtful.
Yeah, absolutely.
This is a big doubt or just a theoretical doubt?
No, it's a very big doubt, because ultimately overdraft facility means the bankers have to be satisfied that the overdraft facilities will be utilized properly.
Okay. I'll come to that in a moment's time. I want to still stick though, Sandeep, with this question of how much of a challenge it is in giving bank account facilities to 75 million households. Now, the government has already opened 15 million accounts as of yesterday, which is 50% more than the target they had originally set for yesterday. To meet their own overall target, they have to do another 60 million accounts within 5 months. Would you say after the start this is doable, or is it still questionable?
Let's not look at the numbers. Let's keep the numbers aside. The key here is to ensure that these accounts, once they're opened, are accessed by the people. And money is channelized into the system, and credit is available through different formats to the people, the last man standing. That is the crucial thing. Forget the numbers, 1.5 million, 15 million, let's forget that. And then look at beyond the apparent and look at what the spin-offs this will bring.
Let's come to the spin-offs later. Why do you doubt that once the accounts are opened, people won't access them? Because people who've opened accounts then have a vested interest to use them.
True, but you just heard Mr. Jha telling you
103 million left dormant.
Now let me tell you.
Why do people leave accounts dormant? Is it because they don't have the money or they lose interest?
It's a bit of both. Now let's look at Narega, for instance. Manrega. Raghuvansh Prasad Singh, when he was Rural Development Minister, was the first to ensure that everybody with a bank account will get the 120, 140 rupees, 160 rupees or whatever. Unfortunately, even that didn't work. Why? Slippages, leakages, corruption.
So the same thing could happen here.
Absolutely.
Mr. Gurcharan Das, you're hearing 3 levels of, I won't put it doubt, but certainly skepticism and concern that what sounded so brilliant in theory when it was announced with such aplomb yesterday may not actually function so smoothly in practice. And the great danger is people may open accounts with certain enthusiasm but then leave them dormant, and as Mr. Jha said and as Sandeep corroborated, there were 103 million accounts that were opened up between a particular past date in 2012 which were then left dormant. Do you share that concern that the track record of the past could repeat itself?
Yes, I do have that same concern, Karan, and the reason is that the incentive system is not right. In other words, the telecom revolution happened in India, the greatest consumer revolution, because the incentive system was there. Now here, this is a statist model. RBI says we do this, the banks are forced to do something. You have a few mailers, and the question is, how will it sustain itself? And instead of this, what I would say, yes, I think he's made a very good start. I don't want to criticize, because this is really what we need. But if you had, for example, if you allowed at the same time more competition, allow Vodafone, what Vodafone doing in Kenya with M-Pesa is a great world success story.
Very quickly, what is Vodafone doing in Kenya?
Airtel Money.
Mr. Gurcharan Das,
well,
very quickly, what are they doing in Kenya? Because we are not Kenyans, we don't know.
What they are doing in Kenya, they're also experimenting and doing in India, and that is that they are using these as payment. All the agents of Vodafone,
I understand,
are places. In other words, correspondents. I take what you're saying.
I'm stopping you there because you're going on to you're talking of a different scheme. Let's not move and talk about an alternate scheme to the one the Prime Minister's launched.
What I'm saying is that you have to get to be sustainable. You have to have the right incentives.
Absolutely. I want to talk about incentives because the point being made, which I think is the correct one, is that if people don't have incentives, they may not use the bank accounts that they perhaps open with such enthusiasm. Now, is not the facility of a 5,000 rupee overdraft and is not the facility of a debit card an incentive to use the account?
Yeah, something that was said earlier is relevant here. You know, there have been surveys even in Bombay which show that the common person, the branch is right there. but they are afraid to go into a branch and open. So it will take care of that kind of problem where people were just scared to go into a branch.
That I presume is happening. What about the incentivization needed to use it?
So once that happens, I think the effect as far as slums and urban areas and census towns will be positive immediately. These doubts they are expressing, I don't agree that they will happen for the urban. But you know, there's a 70 or whatever 60% population in the rural is where these are relevant.
But there is an incentive which is built in, which we are ignoring, which is that there is a life insurance cover and there is a personal accident cover the moment you open the account. That is the incentive, which is different from anything that's been done in the past.
But is that an incentive to use the account, or is that an incentive to simply open the account and leave it dormant?
No. Well, it's a bit of both. It could remain dormant, but equally, if money is channelized, say the direct benefit transfer scheme, if that could be utilized or channelized, if that money could be channelized into your account, then it does not remain dormant.
Absolutely, that's true. But that is for the government to do.
Which it will.
And that depends upon Aadhaar. I'll come to that in due course. But let's first talk about this problem that you pointed out, that people may open accounts with enthusiasm. They may want to access the life insurance and the health insurance, which is a good reason to open the account, but then they may leave it dormant. To what extent is that danger of dormancy taken care of by giving them an overdraft facility and a debit card?
See, first point is that the accounts became dormant not because the account holders wanted the accounts to be dormant. They became dormant because the banks were not utilizing those accounts to lend money to these people. So it's not as though there was
But what you're saying is that the banks won't give them the overdraft.
Absolutely.
Now, presumably, Mr. Modi will insist that at least state-owned banks will comply. This is not going to be left to them as an option. This is going to be a guidance and an instruction from the government. So let's get over it. Let's assume the overdraft is made available. Let's assume the debit card is made available. Is that sufficient incentive to overcome the problem you mentioned of dormancy?
Well, partly yes. Partly yes.
Why only partly?
No, it's only partly because the overdraft facility, from what I read in the newspapers, talks about 5,000 rupees. Okay. Now the debit card, a debit card is useful only if you can debit something in your account. So you must have money in the account. So if you don't have money in the account, if the money in the account is 5,000 rupees, now look at say MFIs, you know, microfinance.
Can I stop you there?
Yeah.
Is it possible for someone to get the 5,000 rupee overdraft if they haven't used the account in the preceding 6 months? In other words, can you say, I'll only use the account when I get the overdraft. Till I get the overdraft, my account can't be used because I have no money. No. Is that possible?
That's possible. Absolutely. You see, for instance, now if the government...
In which case, the overdraft is a very good incentive.
No. If the government payments come in through the account, then there will be some money there. Yeah. Okay. But the point is that if that gets exhausted, if you have only 5,000 rupees in the account, your debit card is only worth that 5,000 rupees that is in the account.
So in other words, you can only use it for a limited period while the 5,000 lasts, and after that, there's nothing there.
Yeah. So what
just one second. So what you're saying is that for this scheme to become essential, and this I think was your opening point, it has to begin very quickly with things like NREGA money going through it, with LPG money going through it,
all
and
the
any other central schemes.
Transfer of subsidies directly to the last man standing. This needs to be that post box. This bank account has to be that post box.
Is this
money
what
has
you
to
meant?
be routed through this.
Is this what you meant when you began by saying that this is one step but not a critical step? Two, three others need to be taken as well.
But I want to be clear, you know, that 5,000 we are talking about poor people in the rural areas. That is quite an incentive. If they can use it, they will go and use the account. So let's not downplay.
You differ with that doubt.
Little bit. It's a question of judgment of how much incentive. That's okay. But okay, coming to the complementarities, yes. What the intention is, and we know that it had already started a year or so ago to link the UID or Aadhaar, whatever you want to call it, with the bank account. That idea, I'm sure, is still in the back of the government's mind.
Let me bring in at this point Mr. Gurcharan Das. Mr. Gurcharan Das, the discussion in studio is establishing that the great danger of the accounts being left dormant will be overcome partly by the facility of a 5,000 rupee overdraft, but more importantly, when in fact government money for government schemes, be it LPG and NREGA or any other central and local government schemes, starts being routed through these accounts. Do you believe that if that happens quickly, then this scheme will succeed?
Well, I think that will certainly go a long way. But I'm talking about a different incentive. I think the banks will still not have the kind of incentive, and therefore I'm suggesting that the real incentive system will be to allow others to come in. Mobile banking is something that the Reserve Bank is seriously looking into. They have taken 10 years to come to this point, but they are about to give payment licenses to the mobile phone companies. That kind of thing will expand the correspondent network, so access of the people. So if the bank is not interested, I can always go to my mobile phone company and they will give me, the same facility.
You are right in saying that the RBI is seriously considering it, but very few people believe it's going to happen between now and the 26th of January. It may be a year or two or more away.
No.
Well, that seems to be the opinion, but if it doesn't happen between now and January, then is the scheme entirely dependent on the overdraft facility and government money and Rega and LPG and others being funded down it?
No, I think there is a change in RBI. I mean, this is the same RBI that gave 2 licenses in 10 years. Now,
well, I think people over here in my studio, I think people in my studio differ. For instance, Mr. Virmani, do you think the RBI is about to open up?
No, not at all. I have been pushing this. I mean, 10 years I have been pushing this thing. It hasn't happened. And what they are considering is very limited. What the scheme which I have been pushing based on the experience he is saying is complete mobile banking, which is completely different from what they are considering.
So what this means is that the success of
this... That's what I was talking about.
Yes, but you heard Mr. Virmani say it's not going to happen between now and January. It may not happen for the next 2 years. He doesn't agree with you when you say the RBI is anxious to do it quickly. But let's move on. Let's not get stuck on the RBI. Let's not get stuck on the RBI. I'm saying something. Let's not get stuck on the RBI because that's just a side issue at the moment. The success of this scheme we've established depends critically on things like government money and Rega LPG. In turn, that means the government has to fully embrace Aadhaar. Has that full embrace of Aadhaar happened? I know it's been spoken about, it's been talked about, but is the government fully committed to Aadhaar, or does the fact that Aadhaar is a UPA baby create a little bit of a problem?
No, I think the government has accepted that Aadhaar is a very useful instrument, and I think the government is going to use it. But the main point that I want to make is that, see, this kind of financial inclusion, which is top driven, it's sort of from the top you say, okay, you open so many accounts, etc., will never work unless there is a commitment from the banks. That means that the banks must have a good revenue model, then only it's going to be sustainable. Otherwise, it's not sustainable.
Why would that commitment from state-owned banks not be there when the Prime Minister is putting so much effort behind it?
No, it has to be a model which is sustainable revenue-wise.
You cannot have more delinquencies. Already, if you look at the NPA, the non-performing assets of the banks, they've risen alarmingly over the last 4 or 5 years. Now, let's just go back to a few things that have happened in the last few years. Kisan credit cards, they work like a charm. Extremely successful. Extremely successful. What is the concept here? RUPA, RuPay. That's the debit card. Rupee and payment has been combined together. You are actually, that's the spin-off I'm talking about. You're actually looking at a brand new system which will rival Visa and MasterCard.
As the Prime Minister said.
And it's an Indian system created by the National Payments Corporation.
As the PM said. Why then will it not be not just top driven downwards, but down enhanced?
We need to understand the psyche of rural India. We need to understand the psyche of the villager, the farmer.
Where does the psyche become a problem? Explain
the psyche is a problem because he's in the clutches of the money lender. What happened?
But he'll get out of those clutches with this.
This is what needs to be driven. This is what needs to be understood by the villager and the farmer.
But why won't it be? You make it seem as if this message won't go across.
The message has to be, it's not a question of teleporting that message from me to you. It's a message that needs to go down, right down to the last man standing.
In other words, it's a question of communication by the government.
Of course, there has to be a massive communication program.
Well, presumably that will happen.
Well, I would think so, because if he's putting so much of heft behind it, I would certainly believe that it would.
Do you believe that that's another obstacle that the government has to overcome? Communicating effectively to the people who are supposed to use this, how they'll benefit if they do, because otherwise they may not realize the benefits and therefore may not use it.
Actually, communication is something they are doing, but the interesting new thing actually from the previous government is this RuPay. The debit card concept, to combine it with the thing, I think is very innovative. Okay. But the thing, so Clearly, because it's a new thing, as was pointed out.
One at a time, gentlemen. Don't talk together. No one will hear you.
Transaction and customer data.
But remember, you know, farmers who are going to the market to buy fertilizer, etc., already are in the market economy. Yeah. They can very quickly and easily start using these things.
It's the ones who are not.
That's right. But those are the ones I am worried about.
To them, the communication is important. Yeah. But you do believe the communication
their incentives and communication is important.
Both. Yeah. All right. We've established, therefore, Mr. Das, that 3 things are necessary for the success of this system. 1, the full embracing of Aadhaar, which the government has now done. Secondly, providing incentives so that people don't just open accounts but use them and don't leave them dormant. And thirdly, and most importantly, communication, so that people realize what benefits they will get if they actually use what is being made available to them. Let me come to some of the costs now. And the first one I want to put to you is this: are you worried that the 5,000 rupee overdraft facility, I know it only comes to be after the first 6 satisfactory months of operating the account, so there is a test mechanism, but once it becomes available, could it end up being a loan that never gets repaid?
No, if it's on a sustainable basis, working with banks, they're not going to let their money get lost. This is not a loan mela type of thing. My worry, in fact, is the opposite, that the banks actually, and this is the point I'm making, the weak link in this whole program is the nationalized banks. And the banks do not have the incentive to do this. And therefore, what I would urge Narendra Modi to do is to get more outlets, more people that are in the system, more mobile banking going on.
But hang on, let me stop you. You're repeating that point. I want to stop you.
Banks.
What is it that he can do that will give nationalized banks the incentive to actually do what they're required to do? Clearly, you and Mr. Jha don't believe that a direction from the PM is sufficient. So what does he need to do to give the banks the incentive to operate properly?
I think that there will be some accounts that will be successful and they will operate. Very large number. Their mentality is a banking mentality. You need a different mentality. You need the microfinance company type of mentality.
The subsidies
you need that Kenyan mentality. You need the bank. You need the M. You need the Bangladesh.
Mr. Das, I'm bringing in Sandeep Bamzai over here, who believes that in fact bankers will do what's required once subsidies are being transmitted down the street.
The moment you transmit or transport subsidies to these people, cash is routed to them.
But that's in the government's hands to do.
Absolutely. And that is the mechanism or the apparatus or the architecture that he is looking at. That ultimately, see, the next 6 months is going to be a free ride for a lot of people. But beyond that, this is what is going to happen.
Okay.
That is the architecture.
What about one other cost? One possible cost, and Mr. Das doesn't believe it will lead to loans that never get repaid, is the overdraft facility. Another is the cost of the premiums for the health insurance as well as the accident insurance. Now, when you're talking about 75 million people, those premiums can tot up to quite a bit. Who's going to pay them?
That will be paid by the government, because I understand that...
This is several thousand crore rupees.
I understand that banks have been told that this is no liability on their part. The insurance premium will have to be borne by the government. So therefore, and incidentally, this is not only the nationalized banks that are doing this, even the private sector banks are opening accounts under this scheme.
Absolutely. Yeah. Everyone's operating. Absolutely. How large a sum, or how worrying a sum, maybe that's a better way of putting it, leave aside how large, how worrying a sum would be the premium for the health and accident insurance? Or is it something that our government can easily sustain?
See, the thing with subsidies always is what subsidies to choose and the leakages. I mean, my rough rule is 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. If you look at the food system, 1/3 is corruption, 1/3 is leakage, and only 1/3.
But overall, actually, the bill is picked up by the government. How easy or difficult is it for the government to pick up the bill?
My point is, if you can eliminate even that 1/3, it becomes a cheap thing. That is the issue. The question is a mechanism. I agree with Sandeep that ultimately the objective behind all this is to tie it up with the subsidy system and get efficiency gains. I don't have a calculation on your premium.
But are we talking about thousands of crores?
At the end of the day, Karan, let's understand the network economics model will work here. What is called the McDonaldization, where this is a volume game. If you get it right, if you get the farmers, the villagers to get into this, it's a big, huge number that you're talking about.
I'm going to end by putting the same question to all four of you to see whether you concur in your answers or you diverge. Because we've raised not just the potential of this scheme, more importantly, we've discussed the problems and obstacles that need to be overtaken. You've all come up with what you think are ways of providing the incentive to overcome the problem. The question is, will it succeed, or will it in fact simply be a promise that remains unfulfilled? And I'll start with you, Mr. Das. Will this scheme succeed, or will it remain an unfulfilled promise?
Well, I think given Narendra Modi's legendary skills at execution, it will certainly go a long way. I think we'll certainly do far better than what the UPA did.
Does go a long way mean success? Does go a long way mean success?
But I also believe that its success will depend on Narendra Modi and others' ability to innovate as they go along.
But now you're still leaving me tantalizingly vague. Does go a long way mean success, or does it mean short of success? A short, quick answer. Which is it that you're saying?
I think that I shall leave you with that tantalizing choice.
Absolutely. I have a horrible feeling that it's not a mystery. It's simply that you can't make up your mind. I'm going to put that to you. Will it succeed, or will it remain an unfulfilled promise?
The old welfare economics model, the umbilical cord has been cut with this. A new architecture.
Is a baby born?
The baby is born. New architecture.
Still born?
No. It's not a blue baby. The baby should learn to crawl and walk. The architecture is crucial. Transfer of subsidies is vital. Money has to be in the bank.
Can you interpret what you're saying for me? Is this succeeding, or is it remaining still born?
It is succeeding if the architecture matches it. It's crucial.
There's an if to this success.
Yeah, there is.
And if the architecture doesn't match, then it doesn't succeed.
Oh, obviously.